Welcome all void dwellers. In this video we're going to be talking about the formation of and consequences of superficial political opinions. We'll be doing this through a discussion of the 20th century philosopher Martin Heidegger's concept of idle talk, found in Being in Time, Chapter 5, Section B. Along the way, we'll be utilizing clips from interviews by the YouTuber NuanceBro to demonstrate or show this idle talk in action, as well as the consequences of this idle talk in action. So then, what is idle talk? Idle talk for Heidegger is characterized by a passing the word along, in a way similar to, although not reducible to, gossip. It is a passing of the word along between information sources such as media outlets and in between individual people. It is the passing along of topics in a superficial way, such that in this passing along, these topics, even though superficial, come to gain an authoritative character. So let me give you a non-political specific example. The other week I was with my friend and she was showing me some of her new teas. She had me smell one of her new teas from David's Tea called Forever Nuts. And she said to me, while I was sniffing it, "You know, it's funny, although it's tea, or we think of it as tea, it's technically not tea because it's made of nuts and dried berries rather than dried tea leaves." Fast forward a week later, I found myself at David's Tea, getting ready to buy some of that Forever Nuts tea, and in an attempt, just without even thinking about it, an attempt to make some well-intentioned banter with the person serving me, I brought up exactly what my friend said to me. I said, "Did you know that technically this isn't tea because it doesn't have any dried leaves? It's just dried nuts and berries." And she gave me a look like... And so as I was walking away, idle talk struck me, and so did the idea for this video. Which is to say, I repeated something I heard from my friend that seemed reasonable, it seemed to make sense, but I didn't do any research on it. I didn't look up the definition of tea and ponder whether this Forever Nuts could fit into the definition of tea even while being dried nuts. I just regurgitated it in an authoritative way as if it were true, because I had heard it in a way that seemed authoritative and true. And no doubt by the look on that woman's face, she will surely repeat it to someone else. This for me is more or less a perfect example of idle talk. It demonstrates something said in an authoritative way, which, when passed along, gains more of an authoritative character, and then so on continues its cycle. However, this cycle is occurring and continuing, with people repeating what they've heard without actually researching it or gaining a deeper understanding of it, just because it topically appears that it very well could be true, and it came from someone I think would probably tell me the truth, therefore I assume it's truth. So in this way, idle talk is something passed along as if it's authentic knowledge, when in fact it's not necessarily proven or authentically researched, and in no way meets the criteria in a person's mind for being able to say, I have true justified knowledge about this belief. It's just, I have this belief because of what someone said, or because of what I've heard, or perhaps, in the case of politics, what I've seen in the media, what articles I've read, what headlines, what stories. I take it to be true, I don't further look into it, and I accept it. So in this way, for Heidegger, idle talk is something we all participate in, and in a sense, it's a very fundamental existential way in which we learn about the world and happenings in the world. However, the problem for Heidegger is that some people never get past this initial average understanding, and therefore, in passing the word along, all can partake, but all are deprived when they partake. So all can partake in idle talk, but in each partaking in idle talk, the person who partakes is deprived of true understanding, and instead they are left with superficial knowledge. So let's now turn to look at this idle talk in action in the context of political opinions through an interview by NuanceBro.
So why are we out here today? I'm out here just to put focus on women's rights and equality for women and everything that entails for our situation that we're in today with our administration, with our government.
And what are some specific issues, like maybe top two?
Well, equal pay obviously is something that I care deeply about, and also women's right to choose and access to health care.
And as far as equal pay, like what does that entail? Like what's the issue around that specifically?
So just specifically women being paid for the same work, the same price. So men, we're paid about 20% less. About 20% less.
77 to 80 cents on the dollar.
Right. And so that's a problem because even women who have a graduate degree make less than a man with just a college degree. So that's something that we need to correct.
And is that for the same job, that statistic?
Yes.
It's not.
Yeah, well,
the 77 cents on the dollar, the one that the president, at least President Obama talked about in the past, that was just if you take the median earnings of all men and all women working full time, and then you just divide it. It doesn't account for, time over that, doesn't account for the same job, it doesn't account for seniority or anything like that.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't speak to the specifics. I read a statistic, I read several articles on it, and I don't know the specifics, I'm sorry.
So as we can see from this excellent dialogue between these two, idle talk translates into people having idle views. So that is to say, this woman has been witness to the idle talk present in culture surrounding the wage gap. And that is to say, often the wage gap is presented as if men and women are making different amounts of money for performing the exact same job, the exact same hours, the exact same experience, the exact same education. That is how it's presented, that there's some grave injustice out here happening to women. When in fact, that statistic is an average annual earnings, or it's the average annual incomes. It says nothing about negotiations, experience, education, job type. It doesn't say industry. There's immense amount of data missing. It is not a controlled number or percentage. When you look at the controlled percentage, it is evidently not problematic. However, since this isn't properly explained by the statistic that's passed around, people idly, through this idle talk, come to have this idly held view that women are in fact suffering this grave injustice in society, when it's evidently not apparently the case. So this even goes so far as this woman is out here, she's made this sign, she's out here to rally with these other women about this cause, and here she is, just by virtue of simple questions that Nuance asks her, she realizes that, wow, I don't actually know what I think I know, possibly, right? You can see from what she says. She says, well, I read some articles about it, I don't know the specifics, right? So very interesting that just topically thinking you know something, right? The topical passing the word along can have such an authoritative character that she's come out here with this sign about something she actually doesn't really know anything about to act as if she does, holding it up, as do a lot of these other people at this rally or protest. So we can see how idle talk translating into idle views can be problematic for oneself and for people, in that they're closed off from having a true understanding. But also there's another dimension of difficulty attached to this authoritative character that these idle views can take on. So in order to demonstrate this other difficulty, or the problematic nature of the authoritative character of idle views, I want to look at some reactions to Nuance being at a protest or at a rally talking to people and interviewing people. So before we look at these reactions, let's first just look at some of the questions that he asks people at this rally. So this is a separate rally about gun control. So let's just get a sense of the disposition he's taking towards these people, the tone, and the kinds of questions he asks.
So why are we out here today? Sure. And what exactly are we trying to achieve by what means? And what specifically are you referring to that you've been waiting for? Like, is there you're talking about gun control policies, or what are we talking about? So what specific policies are you trying to put forward? You know, it's not taking all guns or whatever, but what kind of specific policies would you like to see that you think would make society safer? So you think everyone in the 1% is a criminal? But for example, the two safest states in the union are Vermont and New Hampshire, and they have virtually, no gun control laws. So do you think that gun control, controlling guns is the #1 priority as far as making society safer? safer, or are there other factors that are more significant, or what are your thoughts on that? How is it at the expense of those people? In what way?
So as we can see, he has a very friendly disposition, he's very much looking for the specifics, to have real conversations, to get into the nitty-gritty of things, and now, at the same protest, or at the same rally, let's look at how him talking to people in this way evokes a certain response from others.
Can I talk to you for a sec? Sure.
Oh God, here we go. Okay, how are we trying to achieve the peace?
Sorry to interrupt, but I was told he's a troll.
Is there a reason why you keep interrupting my interviews?
Yeah, I was told that you're a troll.
I'm a troll? Have you seen my videos at all?
Yeah.
Have you?
I'm just
Excuse me.
With the hairpiece?
Excuse me.
With the hairpiece?
Complaints that apparently you're heckling people.
I'm really not. How did I heckle people?
I don't know the details, but when a mass shooting survivor comes up to me and says that you're heckling them, people are starting to question their safety. That's probably not good.
Their safety.
Yeah,
I'm threatening their safety.
You don't even know what this event's about?
Yeah, it's about, you know.
Do you really feel that ignorant to say something like that? It's about ending male toxicity, similar to yours.
I'm not trying to interrupt any speaker.
Do you want me to repeat my yes or no question so I can get a yes or no or not?
Male toxicity.
And having pragmatic conversations.
That's what I want to
about
do.
how flaccid and how weak and how toxic and how fragile and how pathetic.
Very revealing indeed. So to form an understanding of how these reactions are related to idle talk, idle views, and the authoritative character of these views, let's break this down a little bit. So all of the people interrupting him and coming up to him and being aggressive with him are people who are at a gun control rally of some variety. So that is to say, all of the people at this rally, more or less, likely have a similar perspective or a similar left-leaning view on mass shootings and on gun control specifically. So Nuance is here at simply asking them questions about it, but at the same time also trying to stimulate a real conversation, which is what these people are often always saying that they want, is to start a conversation. So we ask more difficult questions, such as, why do some places with some of the lowest crime rates have the lowest gun control? Does this suggest that maybe gun control isn't the issue here, but perhaps maybe, I think he's inferring perhaps mental health and so on. So he's trying to dig into people a bit. The view here, presented by these people and exhibited in their reactions, is that we don't do those questions here.
That comes to an event like this and clearly bullies.
How was I bullying
under
anybody?
This nuance.
How was I bullying
of
anybody?
Conversation.
We have a view, we have our formed view, which namely, what those questions he asks reveals is in fact a bit of an idle view, or a view that's not embodying the full picture. This irritates these people. This makes people feel that their view has the authority over him to interrupt him, to say that it's threatening their safety. And even for this lovely, the best of them all is Mr. Purple Jacket, who talks about toxicity and male toxicity, but he is interrupting Nuance, not only coming up to him while he's having other conversations, he also walks around filming Nuance himself, and then, as you saw, gets in his face talking about how flaccid and pathetic he is, and he thinks that he's being morally virtuous, or that he's acting for a morally virtuous cause. When in fact, no, the case is, he only feels this way, he only feels that he's justified in acting this way, I believe, because of his idle view and the authority that he believes that idle view has. And all of this herein exhibits part of the danger that Heidegger talks about when he talks about how idle views or idle talk can inhibit us from furthering our understanding into the matter, right? So here we have people violently opposing any questioning or any discourse about the matter, which is the matter of the entire event itself. So in conclusion, this concept of idle talk will hopefully seem very intuitive and somewhat obvious to you. But the important thing about it that I'd like to point out is an important thing about a large variety of philosophy or philosophical concepts, namely that it elaborates something for us in a way that we can better understand it and point it out and recognize it when we see it. And I believe that this, in this time, in this historical period, this political period, is a very important concept for us to be aware of in ourselves and in others. While it is tremendously difficult, I understand, for likely almost all of us, I believe that when these idle views arise, or that when we enter into political discussion or conversation with someone about some issue, and we believe that they have some idle view, or perhaps they believe that we have some idle view, I believe that the best way to approach this, even though, as we see very clearly from Nuance's work, is not infallible, the best way to approach this, I think, is the Socratic method. That is, to ask people questions. They may be leading questions, but to ask them questions in a way that is as unemotional as possible, as logical as possible, and with a sort of neutral disposition, to poke holes a bit in what their thinking is, to try to engage in a deeper, less superficial conversation. And that, I believe, is successful even if the person doesn't have an answer to your question, because what their inability to answer reveals is their own recognition that they don't have an answer, or i.e. the recognition in their mind that they themselves hold an idle view. That is, that they are in a sense like the woman with the equal pay sign out here humiliating themselves over something they don't fully understand. And so it's almost like a subtle shaming, because what does that then move the person to do? To have a better understanding. So obviously, of course, this won't always be successful with people, as we see that some people have tremendously adverse reactions to Nuance and to his being there and the kinds of question he asks. But I like to believe that we should always side with reason even when it seems unsuccessful. For when it seems unsuccessful, at least we can re-examine ourselves, our methods, and try to improve ourselves and our methods by whatever means we possibly can.